Welcome to the Tech Savvy Professor podcast. It features two faculty who love tech and love making it part of their work. I'm Marty, a faculty member at Kent State University.
And I'm Eric Perry, program director and associate faculty at Divine Mercy University.
So as part of our attempt to do some weekly recording, we're getting a show in now, and that we'll put out later in the week. But we decided we talk a little bit about cybersecurity and how that's managed. I don't think that much about cybersecurity. Let me say that, but cautiously, because I don't think I do anything stupid to challenge cybersecurity. I also pretty much all the devices I carry around are Apple devices, so the kind of stuff that I have is kind of protected by the ecosystem. I'm sure there's ways that I can pass bad things on to other people, but generally they get stopped before they get there. So so I've been rather lax on it. I haven't had, in terms of my own devices, whenever I scan them for the bad stuff, it always shows up as none. So that has helped add to my feeling kind of lax about cybersecurity. You've worked in systems that are all online and programs that are online. So you probably have a closer connection to figuring out the cybersecurity stuff that you have to do. I know over the last year, I've seen a lot of not only the university, but in the university, there's always two-factor authentication in order to originally or initially log on to university email, things like that, and any services. But frankly, I do it from home. I do it on my desktop, but I also do it at the office. But I really don't do a lot of mobile device work other than answering email if I'm away from the desk. Talk a little bit about cybersecurity, how it's different, and what kind of steps you have had to go through in terms of assuring security with material at the university.
Yeah, so I think it's a big question. And what I don't want to get into is the IT trainings that I'm sure everybody has to do every year, right? Those are what is a phishing email and all that. We certainly could talk through that, but I think we all get that at this point. I think it's important to talk about what happens with your personal devices that you're going to use for work and what some of that looks like. So a lot of these security protocols are in place to help protect the students and the university's data. And now they can vary pretty widely. Like you said, Marty, the two-factor authentication is something that's become pretty standard. Even some of the Microsoft apps, like your Authenticator apps, will allow you to use your fingerprint. They'll use biometrics now to allow you to do that second step, which I think is pretty neat, right? It's a little bit of an advancement, especially for somebody like Microsoft who tends to lag behind a little. But some things that you might not know or you might kind of move past in signing up and getting your devices on your university network are the requirements for what data your university can access on your personal devices. So that can vary from institution to institution. But some examples of that is it may require the Microsoft Authenticator app, the company portal app, or another third-party app that serves as kind of a gateway to log in to access your email, student information, get access to Blackboard, Canvas, whatever learning management system you're using. So they require you to have that on your device. And when you set those up, a lot of times it will give you a message that will tell you, hey, these are the security permissions that this app needs. And a couple of examples of that is it might say the permission to remote wipe your device, your program, such as Outlook, or just university data, depending on how their security permissions are set up. They may be able to remotely access your device to obtain data. And, you might be thinking, well, what's the reason for all this? If they need something and you leave, they can get it off your device. If you're not in a position to have student information anymore, they can revoke that and remove that data from your device. It really serves for them as a safeguard, but I think it's wise for faculty to know what you're giving them access to. That doesn't mean they're going to misuse it or anything like that. I'm not making that accusation, but this is a terms and conditions thing that we really need to be attentive to. So if you have a personal device that you're using for work, the scope of what they can see could be larger than you realize.
Yeah, I don't pay attention to those things when they ask them. I store most everything in the cloud. So let's say I have a tablet or an iPad, in my case, and I'm using it for university, some of it for university purposes or access. I can imagine that they could pretty much do anything if I gave them permission to the device, including wiping it clean. But because I've got all of my stuff backed up in the cloud, the university has their stuff backed up on their servers, but my stuff is backed up on the cloud. I don't fear kind of reprisal where they're going to wipe my whole mobile device. So I think there are things that listeners can do to ensure that their stuff that they don't want wiped is clouded in a way that it's always available to some part. And it surprises me how many people don't use it or take advantage of cloud backup on their material.
Yeah, and I think this is really means of last resort, right? Because there's a lot of legal implications here. The overreach is something that universities would have to be concerned with. I think it's just letting you know these are the things that could happen. And I agree with you. What we need to make sure that we do, especially for our personal data, things that we want to keep around, make sure that's stored in the cloud, but know what it is you're getting yourself into. And what you're agreeing to by reading those permissions that you're giving these other apps when you add your email, when you access a shared drive, when you access something like an LMS from your phone as a faculty member, you could be asked to give those permissions to a third-party app that your school is using to really just keep an eye on the data that's out there. And some of it is used for IT purposes, right? That remote access, they can remote onto your device. So I was using a personal computer to handle an IT issue, had the company portal on it. They were able to, remotely access my device and help me through a technical issue I was working on. So some of those are advantageous and helpful.
I've used YubiKeys, those little external keys where you can they look just like USB-A kind of jump drives. You slide them in, and it can that carry with you sort of your passwords in an encrypted fashion. So if you go on a computer that's not yours, you can have access to what you want to have access to without leaving a trace behind in terms of passwords and such. On the Apple end, and I'm not sure about on the Windows end, but on the Apple end, they're using something called passkeys now, and that might be more of a universal term than I'm aware of it. But passkeys seem to be tied into the biometrics, Touch ID, Face ID, the kinds of things that portable devices can do now that make it rather unique. So you don't have to remember 10 letter, number, character, password, or generate a unique one because basically your eyes or your thumbprint is your passkey. And it makes for quicker sign on. It also makes for a much more secure sign on because unless it's your twin brother, who knows? I guess I've never heard of them testing twins on this, but unless it's your twin brother, I think there's very little risk that you're going to find biometrics that are similar from person to person. So it makes it much more secure. And since it isn't a generated password, it's impossible to crack or near impossible to crack.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned something else too that folks should be aware of. So on the Android side of things, you can use different services to help you keep track of your passwords. Some of those are acceptable, some of them are not. You'll have to check with IT to make sure that's not going to create an issue. The other problem is a lot of times with an Android device, it will not allow you to add a rooted device. This isn't a problem that you have generally with Apple, but if you've jailbroken your Android device, many times it doesn't meet requirements for the security that's required there because that allows you developer level permissions over your device. I'm not saying I've ever done that. If I
Yeah.
did, though, it wouldn't be a device that you would be able to add to your university network if there were permissions that were set against that. And it can tell whether or not, you've jailbroken that device.
Yeah, I love it when folks jailbreak their phones and then complain that they don't work right. Duh.
Yeah.
I just held up, listeners don't know, but I just held up a Galaxy Z Fold, and Samsung has its own little password wallet for passwords. So, there are some device specific ways in which these passwords can be retained. One last thing that I can think of, you might have more, maybe we should talk about suggestions, things that people do, but just something that I've been aware of because following on Reddit, I follow the Apple subreddits that are out there and that are available. And you always get these people who post pictures of, I just got this great new MacBook from somebody. For like $300. Did I get a good deal or not? But when I start it up, this splash screen comes up that tells me I need security administration passcode from the business or whatever technical. So they've essentially just bought a stolen device with the company protects on it.
Yeah, and it happens a good bit. So there's a couple of bidding websites. I don't want to name anybody specifically where you can buy returned merchandise. We've seen this happen a lot, where you buy this returned merchandise, where someone will order the original product and then place something similar or the same defective or stolen product and sell it on this bid site. So you may think you're getting something that's just open box, but it's been replaced with something else. So a lot of times, if you see a deal that's too good to be true, sometimes it really is, and it's something to watch and be careful for. And a lot of these that are these password protected company laptops, university laptops, that kind of thing, they're connected through a network, usually through a VPN or something like that. There's no way for you to reboot or restore or hard reset to use that machine anyway. The hard drive is essentially done, and you would have to replace that hard drive and operating system to get it to function.
Yeah, you talk about those scams with devices, and I know a while back, not too far, sometime in this year, there was a big arrest for a group of people that were purchasing Apple products and then going in the store and asking for replacement, and they had a counterfeit version of the product boxed up. Like they had just opened the box and put that in, and thousands and thousands of dollars were running these scams. But that product, it could get out in the wild, and people can purchase stuff that they think they're getting. And I also see this on Reddit, people who shoot pictures of the product codes on the boxes and go, is this a real product or not? And people are able to identify the misspellings, the type form, and how the type form looks different from one product to another. But I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole now. We're talking about counterfeit devices more so than about security. So suggestions that you would have for folks who are working in an academic environment and using their own devices within that environment to do the work.
Yeah, I think the big one is paying attention to the permissions that the apps request from you. That's going to tell you what access they can have to the data on your phone. And it's a screen that pops up and says, hey, are you going to give us permissions to access X, Y, and Z? Not saying any of them are nefarious or, bad in any way, but so you have some knowledge of what they're going to access. I think in terms of best practices, all the same things that you always hear still apply. Two-factor authentication is what you want to go with. And most of the time it's required. If you're going to use passwords, vary them, make sure they include special characters, letters, numbers, the whole kind of thing. Don't use similar or the same passwords across multiple devices or platforms. Somebody that knows one, they might be able to guess them all. And then, if you're using a university device, know that that device is their device. Anything that you do on those devices is seen there. Not, again, that it would be used nefariously, but if you're checking your bank account balance or paying bills or something on your university laptop, you're then leaving that information in the hands of your IT department to secure. So really just those same kinds of best practices. I think, Marty, you probably mentioned the best one, which is make sure you have your data backed up in a cloud regardless, that you control your own data. I have devices specifically that I use for work and specifically that I use personally. Part of the reason why I have a KVM switch to switch back and forth between my personal and work devices.
Yeah, probably the most valuable advice I can give is own nothing of value, empty your bank account so someone can't do it for you. Those kinds of just sensible, make your life so simple that no one would want to steal it, that it has absolutely no value, even your own identity.
Everything's under the mattress.
Yeah, I think that's where we get and how we get that way, actually, too. So as far as cybersecurity, check with the people at your university. Be open with them about what you've got, what you're using, and what can you do to make sure things are secure, not only for the university, but for your own device. They, like you said, we all go through those little mini lectures at the beginning of the school year about things you should do or shouldn't do, but it's always good to kind of check in. Now, interestingly enough, in my situation, I'm up for a faculty refresh of a new computer. I've asked them for a Windows computer because I already have my office decked out with my own equipment in terms of Apple computers. So I'm going to get a laptop to play with, but I'm sure this is going to be a venture that I'm going to have to get into to pay more attention to cybersecurity and viruses and things like that I've had the luxury of not having to pay too much attention to in the past. So I might be tapping you for some ideas later on in the year, if and when I get that new computer.
I'm game for sure.
Well, there's more to talk about this. We'll probably do this topic again sometime in the future, but like to thank you all for listening to the Tech Savvy Professor. Email us at thepodtalk.network@gmail.com. And give us a question. We'll get it into the podcast and try and get an answer for you. Look for us on Spotify, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, and all podcast servers. Our bumper music is from Philip Gross, Rast, from the Free Music Archive. Everything you need to know is at thepodtalk.net. Look for other shows like Circular Firing Squad and the spatial computing show called Vision Profiles. That's it for this episode. Thanks for subscribing to the Tech Savvy Professor.